Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. I am Joe, and I'm your host every Tuesday evening right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. And this show is for you. It's called Joe Luca Real Estate Show because we talk about real estate, and it's in terms, language, and we talk about issues that are important to consumers. Questions that maybe you've always wondered about, things you haven't thought about to ask, but that's the purpose of this show. I want to do a quick shout out to Vern Rainville. Vern is a public insurance adjuster, and he works for you, not the insurance companies. So if you think, we've had a lot of crazy weather, okay? We've had a blizzard, major storms, lots of wind. We've got a lot of precipitation coming tonight. Countless people have had ice dams. Not that much can be done about that yet, but Vern Rainville is the guy to call if you have any questions about whether you're going to have a claim against your insurance policy. And the thing to remember is Vern works for you, not the insurance companies. He works for you. So please give him a call if you have any questions. 484-300-8495. That's Vern Rainville, public insurance adjuster. He works for you, not the insurance company. 484-300-8495. Vern is a Rhode Island guy. All calls returned within 24 hours. And then, of course, we also want to do a quick shout out for Compass Title and Escrow. Anthony Betancourt and his team at Compass Title and Escrow and Compass Law do a great job taking care of our clients, whether it's a short sale or any type of a transaction. Buyers, sellers, they do an awesome job. 401-379-7770. Again, 401-379-7770. They can also help you if you are thinking about becoming an investor, getting into the real estate business, so to speak. All you have to do is give them a call, and they will be able to help you out. And again, it's 401-379-7770. Okay, that being said, let's jump right into it. So what's going on with the markets today? So go to our trusty website, and we go to Mortgage News Daily. A 30-year fixed rate mortgage as of this moment is 6.13. That is a conventional mortgage, an FHA, 30-year FHA fixed rate, 5.7, 30-year VA, 5.72. I want to point out that VA mortgage is a great mortgage. They can be a little bit more flexible on credit scores, and also you don't pay any PMI, which can be hundreds of dollars a month. It's no money down, no PMI. It's an awesome mortgage for active military and veterans of any war. So please, it's a quick, easy way for you to kind of recoup some of what you sacrificed for our country if you are active military or a veteran. All you have to do is work with a lender. Of course, a local lender. I always tell everyone work with local lenders. So if it's going to be either Embrace Home Loan, Shamrock, Shoreham Bank, Sempra Home Loans, Navigant Credit Union. We have a lot of great mortgage lenders. Anchor Financial, a lot of great mortgage lenders. Washington Trust, who are local and can help you out with VA loans, FHA loans, Rhode Island housing loans, and a lot of other loans. If you have any questions about who to speak with for your situation, please give me a call during normal business hours, 401-409-5030, or you can also send me a text, 401-409-5030. I want to thank you very much for your consideration. All right, the subject for tonight's show is going to be headlines versus housing reality. And the reason for this is because there's a lot of moving parts in our economy, a lot of things that are going on. We're experiencing some interest rate stabilization right now. Okay, the kind of the same story the past several weeks. Rates have come down from where they were, and they're somewhat stabilized, maybe bouncing around at the bottom of the level they've been at for the past couple of years. We're experiencing a cooling of inflation compared to the higher levels that we've had in years past. And we still have a tight housing inventory. Okay, we have like about a month and a half of inventory in the Rhode Island and Massachusetts area. And then, of course, we have persistent housing affordability concerns. Now, when affordability becomes a concern, policymakers, another word for politicians, often look for quick solutions. And one of the most commonly proposed solutions is rent control. That's something that gets a lot of headlines, gets people all fired up. And today we're going to talk a little bit about why that may actually make the housing shortage worse, not better. And that's a housing shortage on the ownership side and on the renting side, the tenant side. So this is a great show, so please, stay tuned in. If you can't stay for the whole show, we do rebroadcast the show Saturdays at 1 o'clock in the afternoon right here on WNRI 99.9 FM 1380 on the AM dial. So right now, the real economic issue is supply. It's not greedy landlords, it's not greedy sellers, it's not greedy realtors, it's not greedy appraisers. It's supply. We are underbuilt in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts, and pretty much everywhere nationwide. There are a couple of pockets where they, had overbuilt, so it's not as bad. But generally, we are underbuilt nationwide. Rhode Island is especially supply constrained. We have zoning, limited land, permitting friction that restricts development. These are challenges that we have 39 municipalities in this little state, and those problems are evident in just about all of them, some more so than in others. Yet we still have steady demand due to demographics and migration, because a lot of people like Rhode Island, they stay in Rhode Island and they don't want to move away. And we have other people who are moving back to Rhode Island from other states. And then, of course, we also have housing formation. Okay, young adults, they decide to leave the nest and create their own home with a spouse, a significant other, or whatever. The thing to remember is when supply is tight, prices rise. That's basic economics. It's not exploitation. This is something I tried to get across when I testified before the Providence City Council a couple of weeks ago. It's economics. It's not exploitation. It's not greed. It's economics 101. All right. So now what I want to talk about next is what happens when you artificially cap prices in a supply-constrained market. So when you don't let free enterprise, the free market, resolve its own problems, when the government tries to step in and solve a problem, it usually exacerbates the problem. Okay? And that is also true when they try to control rent. And this is not just an opinion. This is a perfect example that we can look at the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis right next to each other. I think it was in 2019, St. Paul enacted rent control. And what happened is housing supply, the demand for houses diminished. So people weren't buying homes, people weren't investing in property, so property values went down. When property values go down, what happens? Now the city can't collect as much in property taxes, so they have the same needs as a city, so they have to shift those needs, those financial needs, from multifamily homes to single-family homeowners. So the single-family homeowner is shouldering a larger portion of the burden. Also, what happens is landlords if they're only allowed to raise rent a certain percentage, in this case I believe it was 5% per year, they will raise it 5% every year, because what happens if they don't raise it for the next 2 years, and then the following year their expenses go up 18%, taxes, insurance, water bill, sewer bill, snow removal, then they don't have enough money. So what they have to do is they have to raise the rent every year to make sure they'll be able to pay their bills, essentially. So doing a comparison between St. Paul and Minneapolis, in Minneapolis there was no rent control. After, I think it was 4% a year, after 5 years the rent in St. Paul was 20% higher than it was at the beginning of the time period. In Minneapolis, where they did not have rent control, the rent only increased 8%. So rent controls, rent stabilization was instituted in St. Paul, and it increased the median rent. That's number one. Number two, it decreased property values, because of course now when there's rent control, people aren't going to want to buy property, so that lowers demand. Also, current owners may not be able to meet their expenses or may not want to deal with this, so they sell their properties, and if there's less demand they have to lower the price. And then also, if values go down, assessments go down, and an assessment is the value that the municipality places on a property, and that's how they collect their taxes. So if the assessed value goes down, that means the city or town is collecting a lower amount in taxes. And that shortfall is then shifted over to the single-family homes. All right, we have a caller. Okay, hold on one quick moment here. Hello, caller. This is thanks for calling the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. May I ask who's calling? Hey, Matt in the car. How are you, brother? Good. Uh-huh.
I'm confused on this is North Smithfield and the tax assessment thing, whatnot. And am I correct in assuming that the seller of the house, which was in a trust, has to pay their realtor?
Well, so, okay, the seller, typically what happens now, everything is negotiated individually. So the listing agent has the fiduciary obligation to the seller. Now, an offer may come in, and a buyer has a buyer's agent, and they may say, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, can you compensate my agent for me, the buyer? The buyer's agent has a fiduciary obligation to the buyer. The seller can then say, yes, I will pay X to the buyer. Whatever it is that they asked for, they can agree to that, or they can say, no, I'm only going to pay this, or no, I'm not going to pay anything. That's part of the negotiation. If the buyer says, you know what, the heck with it, I'm not going to use a buyer's agent, I'm going to go right through the listing agent, so I don't have to pay or ask the seller to pay me, so maybe I can get a better deal. Now what happens is the buyer is relying on the listing agent, who has no fiduciary obligation to the buyer. So the buyer is really going in unrepresented. So in your question, I'm not sure. I mean, it's not set in stone that the seller has to pay the buyer's agent. It all depends on what's negotiated out during the transaction. Did that help? Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It was advertised as this much of the house and the thing.
Okay. Right. So yes, and typically yes. Sometimes there is an extra lot between air quotes, but it's not subdivided. So if I buy that house and it's got an extra 10,000 square feet on the side of the house, it still may be one big house lot. So then what I would have to do is I would have to go to the town and petition for a subdivision. So I'd have to hire an engineer, hire an attorney. And then if I got that, so if I invested X thousands of dollars, whatever it is, then I could build a house there, or I could just sell it to someone else who could build a house there. So in that case, there would be additional value. Um, so if it's not subdivided, and if it's all one big lot, Plat 72, Lot 123, and it's a big 20,000 or 30,000 square foot lot, um, unless the seller wants to incur the expense and the time to subdivide it, you can't really realize much extra value for the land on the side of it. What it would do is it would definitely sell more quickly than the house down the street that may be just as nice or nicer, but that does not have the extra land. Sure. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Quit claim deed. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. So you bought that extra lot separately. Okay. So that might still be marked. Yeah. So I mean, if it's unless they combine the lots, which sometimes families did, it would be easier to sell that as a separate lot now if it's still separate. Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. Sure. Right. Now, are you the executor or the trustee? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Sure. Yep. The MLS sheet. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Sure. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. So, uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So did the transaction already? Did the transaction close already, or is it still under agreement? Yep. Mhm. Okay. Yep. Yep. Mhm. Yep. Mhm. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for calling in. If you want to send me a text 401-409-5030, I can speak more freely and I can do some bird dogging for you and tell you, more specifics. But yeah, I didn't know if you were just curious, I could do that for you. So my name is Joe Luca, and it's 401, okay, 401-409-5030. That's my um, business phone. 409 like the cleaner, 409 like the cleaner, and then 5030. All right? Right. Well, for a text message, I think you need to, but you can just call it. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Okay, thank you very much for calling in to our caller. And I hopefully other folks benefited from that as well. Legitimate questions. If you have questions like that you wonder about, you can always call in during the show, 401-769-0600, or you can reach out to me outside of show hours, 401-409-5030. Again, 401-409, like the cleaner, 409, and then 5030. And shoot me a text and I will get back to you within 24 hours. Okay, so getting back to the headlines and the realities of the market. So, rent control actually can increase rental rates, the median rent. It can decrease property values, and the needs, the financial needs that the municipality has, a city or town, would then be transferred to single-family homeowners. Okay, so you know, in theory, it sounds good. Cap rent increases sounds good. Protect tenants sounds good. Stabilize housing costs sounds good. These are all things nice and hunky-dory in theory, but in reality, there are economic consequences. All right. As I mentioned earlier, there's reduced investor incentive. Fewer small landlords are going to enter the market. They're not going to want to buy houses. So that if they do it in Providence, if they have rent control in Providence, an investor could say, well, I don't want to buy in Providence. I can't, set the rent to what I need. I'll just buy in North Providence or Woonsocket or Warwick or Cranston. Okay? The capital flows elsewhere. And then what happens is your risk-adjusted returns decline. And something else to think about, and a friend of mine, fellow board member from NARIP, um, at Loan Depot, he said, he's a loan officer at Loan Depot. Ryan said, listen, that makes it harder to qualify a buyer, especially a first-time buyer, to qualify for the mortgage because they have to go by a percentage of the rental rate, the market rents. So that actually works against, in this example, another way that it works against small homeowners. Okay, so the reality there are economic consequences. Also, if a landlord, a small landlord, if he can't collect enough rent, there's going to be reduced maintenance. You may experience more deferred maintenance issues. Okay, uh, you know, insurance, taxes, utilities, labor. These things they're not capped. Snow removal, that's not capped. So what happens is, well, maybe we won't have this whole driveway plowed. Maybe we won't have the driveway sealed this summer because I don't have the money. There's not enough money there at the end of the month after I pay all of my other expenses and my mortgage. So then, year after year, these issues accrue and the housing quality deteriorates. Okay, figuratively and literally. And then there's also reduced development. Builders avoid municipalities with rent caps. If you can build a 2, 3, 4 family house in a city with no rent control, why would you go where there's a city that does have rent control? Financing becomes harder, as I just mentioned. And lenders are going to evaluate long-term yield risk, so they're going to downgrade the property. Okay, folks, you are listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. We are here every Tuesday night from 6:05 to 7 o'clock p.m. Please tune in during the show. After on Saturdays at 1 o'clock. You can also tune in to hear the show rebroadcast. I also record it and load it up onto YouTube as well. And again, shout out to Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. He works for you, the homeowner, the property owner, not the insurance company. If you think you have a claim because of falling tree branches, because of water, because of ice, give Vern a call, 484-300-8495. Doesn't cost anything for the call, and he will answer your questions and explain everything to you. That's 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Rhode Island guy, calls returned within 24 hours, okay? And of course, Compass Title and Escrow, Anthony Betancourt and his team of attorneys and paralegals do a great job taking care of our buyers and sellers. Okay, so yes, the long-term yield risk for rental properties is lowered. And again, my friend Ryan Ferranti at Loan Depot, he pointed that out when we both testified before the Providence City Council a couple of weeks ago. And then, the fourth reason, the market reality, is just conversion and exit. So small landlords, typically when they can't keep up with expenses because of they're limited by how much rent they can collect, what their income can be, small landlords are going to sell to owner-occupants, who are typically not constricted or restricted, and larger institutional buyers, who they have a lot more flexibility, and sometimes a larger institutional buyer, they'll leave units vacant because it's not worth renting it. And that's one of the reasons, I think there's like 50,000 rental units in New York City that are empty, because it does not serve the purposes of the landlord to spend the money to upgrade those units and rent them, because they can't collect it back at the market rate, the constrained rent, okay? So how does this connect to today's economic news? Now, current conditions, again, construction costs remain elevated. Insurance premiums have been rising since COVID. Property taxes seem to increase pretty consistently. Labor costs are up. And financing costs are still higher than they were in 2020, 2021. They have come down, but they're still higher. Now, when you combine rising operating costs with rent caps, that's where the numbers just fall apart. It doesn't make sense. The math breaks in plain English. Revenues capped, expenses slowly increase. Again, your water bill, your sewer bill, your property insurance, your property taxes, snow removal, those numbers don't stay the same. You know, if you're looking at how much it costs to have a driveway paved or a driveway plowed or anything that requires fuel, it's going to cost a lot more now than it did in 2019 when gas and diesel and home heating oil were so much cheaper. So that compresses your net operating income. Asset values start to decline. And lenders become more cautious when someone wants to buy a home in municipalities or states that have rent control, because guess what, folks? They're trying to push rent control at the state level. So if you are listening, please call your state representatives, legislators, and senators and tell them you are against rent control. And if it becomes an issue in your city or town, call your city or town councilman or councilperson. Rent control is not good. It's not good for tenants, and it's not good for homeowners, single family or multifamily. And even if rent control were passed tomorrow morning, it would do nothing, absolutely zero, to help tenants who can't keep up with their rent today. And in many cases, it doesn't actually kick in for years because they have to set up all of the infrastructure that the city needs to get rent control in place. And what's happened in other places like Portland, Maine, is by the time it kicks in, the market is different. So there's a broader market effect on the tax base, on municipal revenue, on home equity. And this is not, again, not just for multifamily homes, it's also for single family homes. And local banks who are heavily present in these communities may have unnecessary exposure, because if a homeowner can't increase rent to cover their other expenses, they may not, after a period of time, be able to cover their mortgage. Or the property may deteriorate in condition so that tenants move out and then it's not rentable. Now, here is a link between rent control and buying, because rent control makes buying harder. Again, investors exit, inventory falls, rental stock declines, future supply declines, and new construction slows or is eliminated. It evaporates. First-time home buyers are also adversely affected by this as well. There are fewer starter homes available. The conversions distort the supply mix, because sometimes these small landlords will sell to an institutional investor or just a bigger investor, and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to convert this 3-unit rental property into a condominium complex. Now you have 3 condominium units, and they sell them. So now you have 3 fewer rental units. So if there's less supply, that pushes prices higher. It does not help keep them lower. And then, of course, we talk about the wealth gap. The wealth gap widens. Those who already own a home benefit from the scarcity. Those trying to enter the market face fewer options. There's just not a lot of homes there, especially if you're looking at you're very limited at which price point you can look at, or the condition of the home. You can't do any upgrades, you can't do any rehab. You need something that's move-in ready. You may not have something available, or not available that's in your price range. Folks, policies that reduce supply ultimately make entry into the market more difficult. Okay? Let me repeat that. Policies that reduce supply ultimately make entry into the marketplace more difficult, which means more expensive. Why does this matter to sellers? Well, sellers in rent-controlled municipalities face 1, the buyer pool shifts, 2, investor demand declines. There are appraisal adjustments made by the appraisers because income is limited. There's a greater financing scrutiny by lenders. Again, that point is courtesy of Ryan Ferranti at Loan Depot. And long-term regulatory uncertainty, because lenders, investors, buyers, owners, they don't know. What does this mean for 10 years down the road? If you look at how much property taxes have increased in the past 10 years, look at how much homeowners insurance has increased in the past 10 years. Utility costs, if you have a house meter for electric. If you have one heating system and you're paying to heat all of the units and for the hot water, think of how much that has increased over the past 10 years. And now you're looking at, and you were able to increase rent, and now for the next 10 years, you're capped at how much you can increase the rent. These are the challenges that sellers have. That long-term regulatory scrutiny is a killer. And then investor buyers, they price in the risk. So it's like, all right, look, if I'm going to look at this house in, let's say, Providence, so we'll continue to beat up on Providence because that's where it is, they're going to submit an offer that's lower. So I want to sell my house and I think it's worth $675,000. A buyer may come in and say, well, yeah, Joe, I can only increase my rent 4% per year. That means 5 years from now, my income is only going to be able to be this. So I'm going to base my offer on that. Now, here's the kicker, folks. If I've had tenants in my house for 10 years and I haven't increased their rent, so now they're paying well below market rent, which a lot of small landlords experience this. When I go to sell it, the new owner, that's the rent rate that he increases from. So if you have an apartment that in the fair market is $2,000 a month, but I've only been charging my tenant $900 a month, the lease is up, let's say, in May, the new owner will be able to increase the rent 4% above that if that's what the rent control says. 4% above that 900. You can't go back up. You can't go up to the 2,000. So cap rate expectations are adjusted. There's reduced leverage because, folks, listen to this. When risk increases, value adjusts. And the higher the risk, the lower the value. Okay? Folks, you're listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM, 1380 on the AM dial. And, of course, you can check us out 24/7 anywhere on the globe at WNRI.com. If you have any questions for me after the show, 401-409-5030. Again, Joe Luca, L-U-C-A, Realtor. You can Google me if you ever forget how to reach out to me. But I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's Joe Luca, Realtor, 401-409-5030. All right, so now the alternative supply-side solutions. So this is kind of some constructive information. I want to supply some solutions that actually help address the affordability issues that everybody is concerned with on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the issue. One thing that would help is streamline permitting. zoning modernization, incentives for development so we can create new units, new housing units, rental and for purchase. We can have public-private partnerships. You know, many municipalities, they have land that they've, that's in their land bank for one reason or another. That land can be contributed to a private developer and say, hey, listen, Mr. Developer, Mrs. Developer, we will give you this land if you develop whatever can be permitted on the property, a 4-unit apartment building, and you agree to charge the rents in this rental range. There are many different ways to do public-private partnerships. Allowing for accessory dwelling unit expansion. This is something Rhode Island was literally the first in the country. It's very good because if you have a house and you can add an extra unit for a family member or even not a family member, either in a garage, up in the attic, in the basement, you can add another rental unit there. If you have a lot that's over 10,000 square feet, in many municipalities, you can build a separate small structure as an accessory dwelling unit, also known as an in-law back in the day. Okay, everybody hears about, tiny homes. Okay, that's one of the options. Workforce housing incentive, something else that can be done. Because there are a lot of times you have a family, everybody's working, and they still can barely afford to pay the rent. You have a family with 3 kids, typically they want one bedroom each, so that's a 4-bedroom apartment. That's big money. The only long-term solution to high housing costs is more housing. Create more rental units, create more buildings, more properties for people to purchase. So folks, I want to wrap up this subject. The housing market, we've always talked about how it's a big portion of our economy is psychological. But the housing market responds directly to math, not emotion. Because if the math doesn't work out, it doesn't matter how much you love a property, you're not going to be able to buy it. Let me repeat that. The housing market responds to math, not emotion. Everybody in the city can want to buy a house. But if you can't get a mortgage or you don't have all the cash to put down, you're not buying a house. So the math comes first. Economic stability is returning to our economy. Inventory still remains tight. The real estate fundamentals are still strong, folks. That's significant. Real estate fundamentals remain strong. Mortgage rates have come down. There's still plenty of demand. When I hear my colleagues complaining about, oh, there are no houses to sell, we have all these buyers. Listen, I've been in the industry long enough. I remember when we had plenty of houses and no buyers. I'd much prefer it to be now. Yes, okay, there's 40% fewer transactions now, but that's a lot better than 90% fewer transactions like we had back in the day. Regulatory risk affects investment decisions. Okay, refer back to math, not emotion, is what drives the housing market. So my job as a real estate professional, as a realtor, I don't talk about politics. I don't argue with politics. Everyone does their own thing. I try to keep everything based in the data. My job is to understand policy risk and guide my client through it strategically. Okay, my job is not to argue politics. It's to understand policy risk and guide my clients through it strategically. Okay? Several months ago they were talking about a 50-year mortgage, which sounds great, and a 50-year mortgage does make a lot of sense. However, and this was something was proposed by the president. Everybody's like, yeah, rah rah. Listen, we don't need more buyers. That's something, that policy would not be advisable on a macro level, because all it would do is bring more buyers to the pool of existing buyers, pushing prices even higher. We need to continue to get real incomes higher, slow inflation, reduce spending at the federal level, so then interest rates will come down naturally. Okay? What I offer to my clients is rental property strategy review. Whether you own a property, you want to own a property, you're an experienced investor, I can bring another perspective and some ideas to the table that maybe you weren't aware of. I can also help with an equity risk consultation. Again, I work for you to help you make a smart decision to buy or sell or not do anything when it comes to real estate. We can have a downsizing strategy session. Again, maybe it makes sense for you to downsize and sell. Maybe it makes sense for you to downsize, sell, and buy something else or rent something else, or maybe just stay there and age in place. We can go over all of that. I'm not only trying to get people to sell their home unless it makes sense for them and they want to. Okay, this show, I think I'm in my 12th year right now. This is my 12th year, and I just try to provide valuable, reliable real estate information that the consumer can learn from, digest, absorb, and hopefully retain, so you don't make unnecessary mistakes, which typically cost money. Maybe I can point things out so that you don't have a surprise when you go to buy or sell your house, whether you're using me or not. Okay? And then also, investment property risk analysis. Buying an investment property as something to live in as an occupant, or as an investment for like a second property, or a third, if it's 2 units, 3 units, or more, I can help you conduct a risk analysis. Maybe it would be good for you, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would be good for you, but not good for this person. Every situation is different. That's why it's a custom risk analysis. That makes me think, people say, oh, aren't you worried that realtors are going to be placed by AI? No, not really, because there are things that I can provide that AI can't provide. I can sit down with you and listen to you and understand what you're looking for based on all of my experience and everything that's in the market now, and provide you with options. I can tour a property with you and point things out specifically that might be red flags about that house, that property. AI can't do that. AI cannot find houses that aren't on the market yet. Okay? I have several properties that are available that I can sell that are not listed in MLS. 6-unit properties, 12-unit properties. AI doesn't have that. So if you're an investor, I can help you. If you're a single-family home buyer, I can help you, because AI can't provide, AI, like I said, can't walk through a property and observe things that may be problematic down the road. Okay? Folks, we're coming up to the end of the show. This is the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial, and of course streaming 24/7 at WNRI.com. If you want to learn more about me, I have a blog. It's called cupofjoeluca.com. That's a blog, cupofjoeluca.com. And I post things to that on a pretty consistent basis, again, about the real estate market. So if you're looking to learn more, you can read my blog. You can go check out my videos. Go to my YouTube page. Look on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I have the most content on my YouTube page. So if you look for videos, Cup of Joe Luca Real Estate Show, things like that, I have a lot of videos. I try to post my radio shows on there, as well as a lot of other videos that are in the 3 to 5 minute range. Just helpful information. Some of it may be obvious, some of it, less obvious, but could be helpful. If you're looking to become an investor, first-time home buyer, whatever you're looking to do, downsizing, upsizing. If you're going through a divorce, or you know someone who is, you're not sure what to do, please check it out. All right, so folks, as we wrap up the show, please stay tuned. Rick Murney is coming up with some great scripture interpretation. You hear me pretty much every week talk about how important the Bible is. And I always like to say the good books, because it's not just one book. It's a collection of books put together over thousands of years, hundreds of years, by many different people, and it's the Word of God. Okay, so stay tuned for that, and I guarantee you will learn and grow from that experience. Other than that, try to remember, what you want to do as you go through life. Try to make your life better. Smile at people. It doesn't take a lot to have a positive effect on other people, and just spread some love. Okay, that's all Jesus, commands us to do, is to love everyone else. And if there's something you can do to help people, even if it's just being kind, holding a door, shoveling a little extra snow for someone that may need it, helping someone navigate a slippery slope or some icy area, please do. And if you have any questions about real estate, buying, selling, or anything else, reach out, send me a text, give me a call, 401-409-5030, and I will get back to you within 24 hours. And again, thank you to Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster, 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. He returns all calls within 24 hours. Rhode Island guy, even though he doesn't have that 401 area code, 484-300-8495. Give Vern Rainville a call if you think you have a claim on your insurance policy. And then, of course, Compass Title and Escrow, Anthony Betancourt, his attorneys, his paralegals do a great job taking care of our buyers and sellers. So other than that, folks, we'll be back next week. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.